The new Trump administration, Washington, has come up with some announcements on economic policy, and much of it looks rather protectionist. So there was the announcement that there could be higher import tariffs imposed on Mexico or also on imports from China. And also there was a lot of criticism vis-à-vis Germany with its high current account surplus. Germany's current account surplus is not really relevant here because one would have to look at the current account position of the Eurozone, and that current account position is fairly small. That does not mean that there is not some reason to reflect critically the German current account position, but here it's mainly an intra-EU problem because the EU rules say that no country should have a current account surplus which is higher than 6% of GDP. Germany in 2016 stood at 9%, so we should indeed take some measures here, so higher government infrastructure investment and also a reduction of value-added taxation so that imports would increase is a good idea. But in this broader transatlantic picture, I think we have problems in the sense that TTIP, so this free trade area project, is not seriously considered by the Trump administration. They simply want to have a bilateral free trade agreement, US and UK. And also what is very worrying is that the Trump administration is not in favor of supporting multilateral policy. So there is some mistrust, it seems, from the US president vis-à-vis the World Trade Organization. And it's also very strange if we see that there is a Republican congressman who has written a letter to Mrs. Yellen, so the boss of the Federal Reserve, suggesting that the United States should not continue in the work at the Bank of International Settlement when we talk with many countries about future regulations of banks, so Basel III. So we need an international regulatory framework here, and I think it would be irresponsible if the United States would give up multilateral policy and the cooperation through international organizations. As the Secretary General of the World Trade Organization said a few months ago, the idea of multilateral policy and the World Trade Organization is to make the weak strong and the big civilized. So you want to make sure that the relatively small countries get a fair role at the negotiation table, and you want to make sure that big countries have to respect certain rules. And I think that's in the self-interest of the United States that we stick to the multilateral policy and the international organizations. Actually, the United States has broad support from many small countries. It has enjoyed this over decades. And of course, this has been part and parcel of this multilateral economic policy strategy. If the United States would give up multilateral policy and the international organizations, we will all end up in a situation as we have had it in the late 19th century, when you had rivalry of the big powers, when you had very high expenditures in the field of military expenditures, and when we had military conflicts and the First World War in the end. The big difference these days, if we go back to such a power regime again, well, of course, there will be China as a new actor, and there is nuclear armament. So I think it's in the best interest of everybody, and certainly also of the United States, that we continue the multilateral policy as it has been implemented in the past decades. That is not a good idea to implement bilateralism. It's a fake idea, it's fake strategy. It will not yield sustainable long-term benefits for the United States or the world economy.